welcome back.
Hi, Ron.
Here we are again.
Hi, Brian. Hi, Rob.
Let's have a chat about the threat landscape today. I think it has evolved quite a bit recently, isn't it? What are you seeing?
I guess it kind of comes back to really what we were talking about last time, and the change from traditional security, protecting your perimeters to, extending the reach of the people that you want to use your different services. And being able to broaden that out, and I guess particularly with the educational sector, universities and those types of things, remote learning and what have you, it kind of broadens that picture out, and certainly makes it more difficult to defend. So I guess the threat landscape kind of evolved from that.
It's changed a lot since COVID as well, hasn't it?
I mean, that's what I was going to say.
The walled garden of your fortress of your organisation has now changed because, as you mentioned there, remote working and everything else, and remote learning as well, for that matter, has all changed, especially in the university space. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the perimeter has now gone, hasn't it? There is no perimeter.
There is no perimeter anymore. That's correct. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, looking at the sort of cybersecurity breaches surveyed by the UK government, I mean, there's 71% of secondary schools, 86% of further education colleges, 90%, 97% of higher education have all identified a security breach or attack in the last year. So it's not happening. It's definitely being seen, and of course these are the ones that people are spotting. What we don't know is what's under the covers that hasn't been detected.
I have spoken to universities before that have not reported cybersecurity breaches before. So as you mentioned there, that those statistics are probably way out in comparison. I'd be very surprised if not every single HE organisation has suffered from some sort of breach before. We mentioned this before in the last episode that there's a lot more focus on the education space from cyber criminals and nation states, because they see education almost as an easy target because of the lack of funding, because of the lack of resource within those organisations to stop the types of attacks, and the fact that attacks are getting so much more sophisticated in comparison to what they used to be. With the way they're deployed, it's what we call the payloadless attack, which doesn't have a weaponized URL or a weaponized Office document as an example. They just use the language in an email to persuade the other person at the other end, the recipient, to do something they don't want to do. That could be provide contact details, pay a fake invoice, provide credit card details, etc., etc., etc. So,
and I guess that kind of feeds into AI, doesn't it? Generative AI, whereas it was easier to spot, fake payloadless attack in the past, because of most of these things. Let's be honest, they stem from non-English speaking countries, and English was always a second language to those people. But now using your ChatGPTs or your Copilots or whatever it is, it's very easy to construct a grammatically correct English sentence that sounds no different to you or I, and to fool people into believing that.
We work very closely with education establishments right now, and we've seen some of those attacks, and they're so difficult to decipher whether it's being sent from an English-speaking person or a non-English-speaking person. They're so smart and so clever and so believable now as well. You have to be quite. Not smart's the wrong word. You have to look at certain things within the context of the actual mail itself to work out whether it is a bad actor or it is legitimate. But it's so much more difficult now than what it was even a year ago.
Yeah. So I think we're seeing a lot more targeted attacks these days. So whereas before it was that, the Nigerian prince, everyone laughs about it these days. It was just sent out to thousands and thousands of recipients. Whereas I think what we're seeing now with the bad actors, they are researching their target much more. They're using tools, like LinkedIn, like Facebook, all those sort of social networking
I guess that
tools.
feeds into the point that that research piece is a lot easier to do, isn't it? Certainly, we've seen of late more people more new starters who've joined an organisation being attacked. Because somebody's new to an organisation, they get an email from the boss, the CEO, whoever it may well be, do this, do that. They're more likely to fall for it. But, those attacks come from the fact that, when anybody starts a new job, the first thing they do is get onto LinkedIn and say, I've got a new job. Those things stick out like a sore thumb to the people, the the threat actors who are doing that research. So if the research is a lot easier to do, it makes more sense, because it's like anything, isn't it? If you target something more specifically, whether it's an advertising campaign or whether it's a malware campaign or whatever it may well be, a phishing campaign, if those things are targeted, then they're more likely to deliver those results. And I guess AI also feeds into that easier, doesn't it? If you want to do your research about a particular organization, a particular school, university, whoever it may well be, it's very easy to find out who is the principal of this organization, who is the chief technology officer, etc. So I think that the fact that there's a lot of data out there generally, I think in the past people are, talking about protecting personal data and the like, not giving those things away. I think the reality is we've given it away. It's all out there, and people are, willingly putting it online. Companies put it online, and certainly I'm sure it's the same with schools. As it is with businesses. I mean, it's very easy to go to a particular organisation and, about us page on the website, and it's got portraits, pictures of all the staff, and a bit of background, a bit of a bio into who they are. So to be able to impersonate those people becomes a lot easier to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
They've got so much more information, as you're saying there, about the people that they're impersonating as well. It's not just about the input or the actual content of the email. It becomes so much more believable if it's been sent from the person that you trust and know, or you believe it's been sent from the person that you trust and that you're more likely
got little nuggets in there, like I'm playing golf at the moment, or I'm at my holiday home, or little bits of information they've found from their online presence.
Yes, and if you can imagine, if you're a user in an organisation like a school, college, or a university, where teaching probably is at the forefront of your mind to get your students up to a certain level, or the level they want them to be, cyber security or cyber awareness is going to become less and less. You'll become. It's not as important as your day job, if you see what I mean. So, yeah, there's that side of it. But I also think from the landscape side of things as well, is that everything has become so much more sophisticated. We talked about this in a previous episode as well. That cyber criminals out there are. It's not just throw enough mud at the wall and hopefully some of it will stick. A lot of it sticks much better now because of the tools and the technology that they have to be able to get what they want.
Yeah, and I think the communication channels open to particular users, staff, pupils, regular organisation users. As we said before, 90% of attacks, successful attacks, do start with emails. Surprisingly enough, in 2025. But, they might start with email, but they quite often quickly go to some other communication channel, and it's not unusual to see, in the real world, people saying, contact me on WhatsApp, within a business sense, and I think the malicious actors can easily play into that side of things.
Using that to get them away from a well-governed, controlled medium like email. To get them onto an uncontrolled communication.
Plus also, with the rise of things like, Team Chat, Zoom Chat, Slack, whatever it may well be, a lot of those things are less protected perhaps than email has been, lots of controls. And it's much like anything else, isn't it? The softer touch for malicious actors being able to be able to disseminate those attacks more successfully really comes back to what, we were talking about at the beginning of this episode, talking about how the UK government stats show how a high percentage of schools, universities have all been attacked, and I think we were saying last time about they were potentially easier targets because maybe lack of funding, maybe more lack of education going forward, and broadening out of technologies, and how technology has become a core part of business, schools, education, those types of arenas. So I guess that kind of lays the scene for the threat landscape in general, doesn't it? The more broader technology, more use of technology, and
AI as well. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah. AI has become more to the forefront in the last 12 to 18 months than it ever has. I've been working in cybersecurity for the last 8 years of my career, and
Yeah, it's been there for a long time, but obviously it's suddenly come of age, and it's being used now. And so on both sides of the fence.
So it's so much more smarter now than what it was before, isn't it? Really, and everyone has access to it. I mean, you go onto Google and you've got access to every single. Pretty much, I can think of 3 off the top of my head that you can use, and they're all free, and they can write you pretty sophisticated and smart and clever messages or emails. That are believable to most people, unless you are diligent, unless you are smart. AI is the key for everything around that side of things.
Yeah. So how can the education sector be more proactive in their approach to cybersecurity then? I mean, I think one of the key things I'm always hearing is sort of defence, but I think it's a bit like the backup story. Everyone talks about backup, whereas the really important thing is, can you restore? So is it the same really in the cyberspace, where we need to have that recovery plan in place? So we're not sort of sitting there going, we've got great tools in place, we're not going to get attacked. I think we all know that the reality is it's not a case of if, it's when we get an attack. So having that cyber recovery plan maybe is one way of being more proactive.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's, I was always struck by Adam Banks, who was the CTO of Maersk at the time when the Maersk had their big ransomware attack, and he was quite open really, and he'd done certain TED talks etc. about the whole situation. But one of the key takeaways that he had is to say that it's not about detect and protect, it's about respond and recover and how you do those things. And it was quite I always think it's quite interesting the way he was talking about how they would, they'd lost all the workstations that they had. None of them were working. So the thing was, let's just rebuild the workstations. But they rebuild the workstations via the network. The network wasn't there because of the ransomware attack. So how do you do these things? So somebody went down to Best Buy or whatever it was to buy a whole load of USB sticks. But Best Buy only stocked about 8 USB sticks or something like that, and they worked out that they needed 300 of these different things. So how do you do that, and how do you communicate whilst those things are going on? So that was one of his big takeaways from it, is just assume it's going to happen, and what are you going to do when it does happen, and make a plan to be able to recover as quickly as possible.
And you mentioned about the recovery plan as well. What I've seen as well is that pretty much every university I've spoken to in the last 12 months has got a recovery plan in place. Most schools have recovery plans in place, and most colleges have recovery plans in place now as well, which is great to see, because it's not a question of, I hate to say it, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when something happens. Hopefully you can isolate the attack quickly and it doesn't spread, but you still need a recovery plan for that, for any scenario, I think, don't you really?
Absolutely.
And having that in place, whether you've got cyber insurance, whether you haven't got cyber insurance, it's just so you want to get your organisation up and running as soon as possible, and the best way of doing it is having a decent recovery plan in place.
Yeah, and to understand the realities of those plans, rather than just taking a plan as a policy. Oh, this is our policy. This is what we're going to do. Actually, role play it. Work out how it's actually going to go within the real world, and involve people there. Rather than senior people in your organisation, involve the people there. At the coalface, for want of a better expression, and actually do that day in, day out as to the reality and how that's actually going to work.
So I was talking to a university in the north of the country about 6 months ago, and they were saying to me that they had a successful ransomware attack that cost them around about £2 million to recover from, and it's still 2 years later they're still recovering from that initial attack. They still haven't got themselves back to where they were before. So it's not only the cost of these types of ransomware attacks, but it's also the time it takes to recover from them as well. And to be fair to them, at the time they didn't have a recovery plan in place. And I don't think they had backups either. They probably have now. In fact, I know they have now. So things have changed, definitely.
Yeah, I guess there's two sides to that, isn't there? There's the cost of the actual attack whilst it's going on, but then there's also the cost of the recovery. And without a proper recovery plan in place, that cost is always going to be a lot greater.
Definitely.
Yeah, and it's people don't realise what it is. They sort of see, the systems are down, but they don't see that long-term cost of systems not working properly for many months, of maybe clients not being able to buy things, people not being able to log onto systems, access data. it's that long-term thing, and plus the reputation. So it's a big impact.
I think we haven't really touched on the reputation, but I think reputation's massive. If you are a student and just about to leave further education and you're about to look for a university, and you know the university you're going to, if I was a parent at least anyway, and I knew that that their data had been stolen or they'd suffer from a ransomware attack, I would be less likely to recommend that my son or daughter go to that university for that reason. I don't want my son or daughter's data to be removed or stolen and used somewhere else they don't know about. So yeah, that the reputation's a big thing, especially.
And so that then runs on for years potentially.
Yeah,
you might be
do.
researching that 3-4 years in advance. You just don't know, do you? I suppose that's also brings us around to maybe the cyber insurance side of things. I think it's potentially something that some people have got, some people haven't got, and I think there is an element, certainly with ransomware, that people become a target because they've got cyber insurance. They know how much the cyber insurance is valued for.
Yeah. So
that's the ransomware cost.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something we're seeing.
Yeah, I've seen that a bit out there in the education sector, especially. Cyber insurance has become a lot more popular than what it has in the past, especially in the higher education space. A lot more organisations now have it for that reason. And as you mentioned there about if they got £1 million cyber insurance, then that's exactly what the ransomware is going to ask for. I think cyber insurance is good. I think it's a great thing to actually have. But there are quite a lot of loopholes to go through to get onto or get accepted by a cyber insurance company as well, for obvious reasons.
And I think a lot of the cyber insurance policies, they do tend to have parameters in there whereby you have to have certain defences in place. So I think that's a really good thing, that you can't get cyber insurance to deal with other organisations if you haven't ticked at least the basic cyber security boxes.
Yeah, and I certainly think that's changed, hasn't it, over the past few years. Also, somebody I was talking to some customer, and they were likening it more to car insurance. You got cheaper car insurance maybe if you've got a black box within your car, maybe if you put it on a driveway, maybe if you put it in a garage, and all those types of things. I think cybersecurity insurance is certainly has gone much the same way, hasn't it?
Definitely has.
Yeah.
That's not bad. That's a good
exactly.
thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
definitely.
One other area when we're talking about the threat landscape, I suppose is quite a key one at the moment. Is I think most people are probably aware that Microsoft have announced the end of life of Windows 10. It's this October, so it's rushing up to meet us, and I think there's this whole risk now of people who are not going to be on a supported operating system.
Yeah, I guess that's probably quite an issue within schools. And
absolutely, yeah, and education as a whole, not just schools, but the whole of education, where budgets are as tight as they are right now. Is how do they replace machines that are not supported by Windows?
Exactly. It's not just the software, it's the machine, but also I guess there's also the educational piece. Getting your users familiar with a new operating system, getting them productive with those things. So it's quite a minefield, isn't it? As for any organisation, but particularly. Particularly, I guess, education, and particularly if you're up against that, the deadline of it changing, because you don't really have a lot of leeway, do you?
Sometimes you can't. A lot of organisations, like schools especially, will have older software, and they won't run on anything else other than Windows 10 or below.
Yeah, very bespoke bits of software that just about run on Windows 10
as well,
potentially.
But also from the point of view of obviously, Windows 10 then becomes vulnerable because it's not being fixed, it's not being patched. But then, you introduce more vulnerabilities because other pieces of software don't work with Windows 10 because they're not supported either. If Microsoft don't support a particular operating system, no third party is going to support it either, are they?
Exactly. I think that's the thing people need to understand, is that once the system goes out of support, anything running on that operating system isn't supported. And I think that's quite an important thing to bear in mind. Most vendors will obviously stop support of their software on Windows 10 at the same time.
Well, it's a big cost, isn't it, for any vendor? If you're developing your own piece of software, the amount of testing, the amount of environments that you've got to do. If you've got to test on, Windows 10, Windows 11, Mac potentially, Linux maybe, and all those different scenarios. So there's a huge cost, isn't there? So as soon as Microsoft stops supporting something, that third-party vendor's going to want to drop it too. So definitely, yeah. And I guess it's kind of it's quite a big impact coming up. Be interesting to see how most educational institutions deal with that going forward. I know it's happened in the past in Windows XP and whatever other versions of software we've had, but
Yeah, and obviously the risk was proven there. We saw the WannaCry, going back a few years. That was Windows XP running in NHS environments.
Yep.
It was unpatched, unsupported, and the worst did unfortunately happen. So it's not like it's an empty threat. There very much is a risk there.
We've got experience of it already, haven't we? So
Exactly.
I guess there's also the cost too, isn't there? Because I know with the Windows XP WannaCry at the time, I think certain sectors of the UK government were paying Microsoft for extended support on those.
And that will be available with Windows 10 and again, but once again, if it's a budget problem to not being able to upgrade,
Well, exactly.
can you afford to pay Microsoft for extended support?
Yeah, and it's compounding the issue, isn't it? Because there's there's the budget problem, but there's also the time and the effort and the being able to feed that into the rest of your day jobs.
Yep.
Okay, so in conclusion, then, I think the email threat landscape in the education sector is really evolving constantly, and the cyber criminals are employing more sophisticated techniques, including AI, to target educational institutions. So really, by staying informed about the latest trends and having those recovery plans in place, you can basically protect your sensitive data and then hopefully ensure a secure learning environment. And so in our next episode, I think we're going to be talking about the benefits of integration. So linking together all our tools and getting better information from that. So look forward to seeing you guys then.
We'll see you then.
Thanks a lot.